Hello, it's Mr. O'Mara here, and I'm back again. I'm just organising my desk if you hear that noise. I'm back again to talk about something that I think it's probably fair to say freaks a certain number of people out, and that thing is fractions. So let's see how we go with this. So I like to think about pizza, not just because I like to think about fractions, but just because I like to think about pizza. So if I've got one pizza and I've divided into 4 pieces, then I have got 1/4 of pizza. I think most people can get their head around it at that level. That's not too complicated. I think what throws people is how to manipulate those fractions. One thing I would say before we start going is that some people are still writing their fractions like that, and that's how lots of fonts and stuff work, but that's not very useful for when you're doing numeracy and maths. It's much better to have that clear line in the middle there so that you can actually manipulate it. So let's go back to our pizza. Let's say that I have 1/4 from over here. So I have 1/4 and I am having 2/4 from a second pizza. So I'm having a slices of the Hawaiian, I'm having 2 slices of the pepperoni. So it's 1 plus 2 over 4. When I add these together, I actually just add the top lines. Now this confuses some people because they want to add the bottom lines as well, but if you look at it, I have clearly had 3/4 of a pizza. You can see that there on the diagrams. But some people forget that when they get onto handling the equations. So when you're adding them, you just add the denominators over the top. You don't add the denominators down the bottom. The trick is that all of these guys have to be the same. So let's move on to how we handle that, because pretty much any problem is actually going to have different denominators. So just having a look at this, let's say that I had 1/4 of this pizza, I had 1/2 of this pizza, and I had 3/4 of that pizza. Before I can actually work out, I can't add straight across the top because these ones down the bottom are different. So what I need to do is get these in common. Now I can look at this and say, okay, 4, I can't divide 1 over 4 into 2, because if I divide the 4, I'm going to end up with a fraction up there, a fraction within my fraction. So I'm going to leave 1 over 4 as the same, but I can double everything in 1 over 2. So I'm going to double the 2 down the bottom to get to 4 to make it match, and I'm going to double the top as well, because 2 out of 4 is 1 over 2. It's still a half. And then I get to 3 over 4 because that's already over the right denominator. Then I can say, well, I've got 6 over 4, and that's fine, except 6 over 4 can be simplified, so I've had 3 over 2 of a pizza, and if I want to express it in a way that's probably easier, I take the 3 off because I've got a whole lot of 2, so I've had 1.5 pizzas. And if we look back to our question, that's actually pretty intuitive. I've had basically a pizza between the 3/4 and the 1/4, and I've had another half. So I simplify it as I go. Let's look at something perhaps a little bit more challenging. So let's say that I've got 2 parts out of 7. Let's say we're talking about blocks of chocolate at this point. I've had 2 parts out of 7, that particular block of chocolate. The next one, it was in smaller pieces, and I had 5 out of 14. And the next one actually had huge blocks, and I had 1 out of 2. Now, I cannot just add these at the moment because all those numbers are different at the bottom. But if I doubled 7, I could get to 14. And if I times 7 by 2, I could get to 2 by 7, I could get to 14. So here's what I'm going to do. 14, so I doubled the bottom, now I'm going to double the top. So it's 4 out of 14 pieces. Plus 5 out of 14, because that's already the same. And this one, I'm actually timesing the bottom by 7 and the top by 7 as well. So now I can add them together and say I've had 5 plus 4 is 9. I've had 16 out of 14 pieces. Now, that can be crunched down as well. I can halve both of those. So that's in fact 8 out of every 7 pieces. And if I wanted, I could even say I've had 1 1/7 pizza. Not pizza, sorry, we're on chocolate now, aren't we? So that's how we get them all over the same base, and then we can just plus and minus them as we go. As long as they're sitting over the same base, you can actually start ignoring the base until you've got your answer and then simplify it. This is where it gets a bit trickier. When you're timesing things, Miss Soulas is giving me a look because I'm doing maths talk. So what food will we use now, Miss Soulas? Just call it out.
Mandarines.
Mandarines. How many pieces in a mandarin? Like 8?
Maybe.
Okay, so I have got 3 bits of a mandarin, 3 over 8, and I want to know what a third of that is. So I'm timesing it by a third. Now here, I just time straight across. So 3 times 1 is 3. 8 times 3 is 24. I cannot simplify that because I've got an odd number and an even number. Actually, yes, I can. That is, in fact, 1 over 8. I was confused there. So I, in fact, now have 1/8 of a mandarin. And that makes sense, actually. If we look back at the question, 3/8 divided by 3, of course that's 1/8. So there you go. You can just times them straight across. So if I've got 2/3 times, 7 over 10, then I've got a times across, I've got 14. I times across, I've got 30. I can bounce that down to 7 over 15, and that's as far as I can get. But you just times across. Now, the last one, and this is actually quite tricky. Oh, actually, this is the second last thing I'm going to talk about, and this is quite tricky. And that is dividing fractions. Let's say that I've got a half, and I want to divide it by a third. Now, at this point, my brain would simply explode. So, to stop my brain exploding, what I'm going to do is turn it into something easier. I keep a half, but I'm going to invert the 1 over 3 to 3 over 1, and I'm going to times it. Because I've inverted the fraction, and I've taken the opposite of the function. So that will now work. So I times them out, 3 over 2, which is also 1.5. Just ignore that scrappy bit there. It's 1.5, 3 over 2. So when you're going to divide a fraction by a fraction, simply invert the second fraction and times them out instead. I'll just do one more of those for you because I know these make people's heads spin a bit, even when it's quite hard. So, we've got 23 over 42 times, divided by a half. So I keep my 23 over 42, but I times it by 2 over 1, and that equals 46 over 42, and I can actually simplify that down to 23 over 21. And I don't think I can go any further than that. So one last thing I want to talk about, and that is how I get things down to irregular fractions. I've run out of paper. So I'll do the irregular fractions in another thing. I know I could get another screen, but I'll do it in a separate video. So I'm Mr. O'Mara. I'm sure you know. I hope this has been useful to you.